Welcome to CIME. I'm your host, Rashawn. Have you ever been in a situation where something is happening and you didn't see it coming, and then your life is shaking and you have to feel like you got to pick yourself up and you got to move on anyway? So our guest today, Angelia, is going to talk to us about an event that happened in her life and then tell us how she's getting through the world and give some advice to you expertly. So let's go. All right, we're here. It's today. It's time to make it happen. Angelia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am remarkable. So, I just kind of gave the world a quick introduction to yourself, but I want you to tell us who you are and what you represent.
Whoa, what a big question. My name is Angelia Abouhassan, and I'm here to represent the Breath Lady Project. The Breath Lady Project is an initiative to teach people how the power of the breath is one of the most important things in the world. I have lived a life of hard circumstance and tried to figure it out, and the breath is the thing that brought solution and resolve into my life in a way that nothing else ever did.
Oh yeah, great breakdown. But as it pertains to your life, I can tell. Like I first met you on the social media. I was kind of just scrolling through, and then I was like, man, what's going on with this lady right here? Because it looked like you were recovering for something and from something. So I just kind of over time, I just was watching, and I was kind of motivated. I'm like, man, she's kind of really getting after it. And then I think we spoke on the messenger, and you hadn't been outside in a while, and you were like, hey, you know what? Can you take a video of you outside? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I got you. Because really, honestly, I was so impressed about who you were after learning about you and just reading what you had going on. And then I was like, oh, yeah, she's pushing it. I got to think really hard about who I am and what I'm getting after. So, when people hear your story for the first time, you know, what do you want them to feel or understand about you?
I want them to understand you can survive through anything that happens in your life, and you can morph it into something that brings evolution, growth, perspective, and grit into your world unlike any other. That's what I really would love the impact to be. My story is one of triumphant, of survival at some points, and then of learning how to survive or learning how to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. So we take it back because for everyone out there, you were a stroke survivor, right?
Yes, I am. I'm a trauma and a stroke survivor. The trauma is what led into the stroke because it was unresolved and not for lack of trying at all. There was a lot of attempt at trying to unpack and unwind some of these things that occurred in my early childhood and a lot, decades of trying to figure this all out. And finally, it took having a stroke at 44 where I was left paralyzed on my right side. I was left without vision on my right side. And I was stuck in a wheelchair for like almost 2 years.
Whoa.
And yeah, it was. That's why I kept asking people to send me videos because getting outside was a special occasion for me, you
Mhm.
know? So, yeah, it's been quite a journey. I'm a little over 7 years out from all of this now. I have successfully been able to return my vision. My eyesight is better than it was before I had the stroke. It's crazy. I don't even need glasses these days. And and I've been successfully rehabbing movement in my right side. I still live with some minor deficiencies that I've been unpacking 7 surgeries later and still trying to unwind them. And yeah, I keep pushing. I'm rocking it out every day.
Well, that's awesome because that's a story of resilience. When I think about your story and I think about watching you on the social media, working yourself out, getting back to walking, getting your balance together. Uh, I think about the myriad of people who things happen to, and they just like, well, that's up for me. This was the Lord's will, and very few people are like you. Very few people say, you know what, it's not going to be my story. I'm going to back up and I'm going to make it happen. But people like you are the ones that people need to see, because I only believe that people don't have the belief that they can get back up. Sometimes they just haven't seen it, and then people haven't supported, and people haven't told them about, like, hey, this is how you do it, both visually and both from a spoken perspective. So you had talked about coming home to yourself. What does that actually look like?
That's an interesting question. I remember the days that, and not even days, it was years of physical therapists and physiotherapists and doctors and neurologists and all these specialists coming into my world. I was thinking was going to be a part of my team, looking at me and blankly saying to me, well, you're post 18 months from having the stroke, you're going to maintain this.
Mhm.
Your body is not going to heal. And the devastation I felt internally was deep and it was thick. And it was something that I had to not just sit with, but learn to rewire within my own psyche, within my own neurosystem, within all of it. And one day I just was like, enough is enough. Ironically, I was in therapy. I landed into a trauma yoga class, and I couldn't move. I couldn't move anything on my right side. I still hadn't gotten vision back. And I just went to this class. My husband was the one that was logging me in because I had no idea how to use any of these electronics anymore. And he logged me in, and I would sit in this class, and all I would do was breathe.
Mhm.
I would just sit there and breathe. And the techniques that they were teaching me, I took home with me. I practiced all the time because movement can come in any way, and breath is movement. Breath is shape shifting inside of your body. And um, it's kind of like misunderstood too. Like when we sit here and we think that all of these doctors know exactly what is going on,
Yeah.
when in fact
Hmm.
they like it. And it's no, I don't sit here by any means to discount what physicians do, but I had to change the way my brain thought. I had to change the way my speech spoke internally and externally, about who I was and what was going on with me. I had to, and those were the biggest steps. I had to be able to look at myself in the mirror and love what I was looking at whenever I
Hmm.
didn't love myself.
Yeah.
Because I did not love what happened when that stroke happened. I didn't love any of it. And today I sit and I say it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
I mean, that's powerful. I don't mean to interrupt, but that's powerful for you to say, like, you didn't love what you saw after the fact, because you lived in a life, or whoever you was at that time. That's how you visualize yourself. You like, this is how I'm moving, grooving, gliding, sliding. This is who I am, and then boom, it's you no longer recognize yourself. So with saying that, well, who was Angelia before everything changed, and who are you now?
Well, Angelia, before everything changed, was stuck in trauma.
Hmm.
Honestly, the stroke happened right when the Me Too movement happened,
Hmm.
and the Me Too movement triggered a lot of my trauma. My history of trauma is both physically, emotionally, mentally, and I dealt with a vast amount of sexual trauma as a child, and it did something to me that I didn't understand. And it took me decades to try to understand it. And like I said at the beginning, it wasn't for lack of trying, at all. I dealt with addiction, and I had gotten sober in my early 20s. I white knuckled this sobriety, holding on to it with every ounce of energy that I had. I had relapse after relapse happening. I had sobriety coming back in and going back out, coming back in, going back out. I had these patterns that were established in a dysfunctional nervous system that I didn't recognize. I didn't understand them. I didn't know what to do with them. And I would go see psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, hospitals. Like I went in and tried spiritual weekends, religious teachers, you name it. Underneath the sun, I was trying everything to fix what had happened. But it wasn't until I landed into all of this breath and yoga that I really started to get a grasp on the somatic damage, and not just so. I don't want to say somatic damage. That probably isn't the right term. The damage that had happened inside of my neuro system, having
Hmm.
to go through the decades of trauma that I went through as a young child and an adolescent and a growing adult woman. Um, and I'm going to tell you right now, it has been such a glorious journey over the last 7 years and learning how to work with the body's systems that don't use language in a way that I can communicate with them, that there is safety within.
Okay.
And that was what was bringing me home. That first breath that I fully took in that trauma yoga class is what opened the gate. And within 4 months of practicing that breath all day long, every day, my vision returned.
Oh.
And as soon as my vision returned, I was like, okay, there is something so big happening here that I have to learn everything under the sun about it. So I dove in. I dove in with everything I have to learn. I went through a functional nutrition practitioner program, not to become a practitioner, only to learn how to use food as medicine. And I started using food as medicine. I was able to wean myself down off of all these crazy medications that they put me on that were inhibiting the ability for my body to achieve a current of neuroplasticity within it so my brain could heal. Because whenever you have a stroke, part of your brain dies, right?
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, it's like Google Maps. It's recalculating,
Mm.
recalculating,
Okay.
recalculating. And you're constantly having these neuro messages flying around your brain that are trying to land in the pathways that it knew originally. Well, these pathways had to be remade, and that's what the challenge became. Let's remake all these pathways so my body can fully heal. And I told every single one of these PTs, if you're not on my team and you're not speaking to me in a place of we can do this, then we're not teammates. And I
Mm.
found PTs that were going to talk to me in the way that we can do this, because that became my language. I'm going to do this no matter what, and I wasn't going to stand for anything else. And so I started speaking to my body that way. I started looking at this image that was looking back at me, that couldn't even stand on her own, that couldn't even bathe in a shower properly. I
Mm.
couldn't even feed myself. I couldn't use computers. Before all of this, I worked as a project manager for national construction companies. I built big box retail stores. I managed these locations, taking care of all of their after disaster and after build construction needs. I ran multi-million dollar projects, and I did this all over the country. I traveled a lot. I went and, you know, put myself out there in a world that wasn't very woman savvy. So I dealt with a lot of stress, and then I was a mom at home, and I was a wife, and I was living life the best that I knew how. Today, I don't just live life. I live consciously. I stay connected and I live with purpose.
Yeah, you sound like a fighter. You got me out here. You got me motivated. I'm like, shoot. I like to believe that I can pick myself up when it's time to go. We all are. We face our own demons, if you will. We all are experiencing those negative patterns in our life that we don't necessarily expect. But listening, you talking about like, hey, you know what? Like the passion you talking about, like, hey, you know what? I was out there. I was getting it in. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was around the world, and then I was locked up in a room. Then I was trying to stand back up. Then I was trying to eat. Then I was trying to get people just to support me the way I want to be supported. And then that now you're like, boom, I'm here. I'm getting back in the game.
It's so true. It's so true. Rashawn, I'm going to tell you right now, it's 1%. 1% of people that have experienced a stroke at any point in their life that recover. 1%. That is such a small margin. And when I learned that number, I was like, oh, I'll be damned. I'm going to be the 1%. I know I am. And I just fought and fought and fought. And every day it wasn't pretty. It was a battle. But I was ready for the battle. I armored up, I showed up, and I still show up. Over 7 years later, I still show up every single day. And I work on this because this is my life. This is my life. I'm not ready to throw the towel in.
If something significant, they have this significant event happen to them, right? I think the idea of them being disconnected from themselves could be pretty high. That you think that's fair to say? And once they disconnect and say, woe me, I guess, woe me. Um, what would you say to them? What's the first truth that you have for them?
Well, the first thing that this all turned into this absolutely beautiful initiative called the Breath Lady Project. And in this, I go out and I work with trauma survivors. I work with stroke survivors. I work with everybody, anybody in the community. And it doesn't matter what your background is, because these days we all deal with a level of disconnection. And the first thing that I try to educate people on is you're the only one that's ever going to live inside of that body. I'm the only one that's ever going to live inside of here. And this body here is my temple. And this is my home. Okay? And if I'm not loving my home, how do you expect anybody else to pick up on that energy of love? How do you expect to receive that energy of love? So, that really became the first thing that I had to work on. And that's what I was talking about with speech, with mirror work, with looking at myself in the mirror. And even if I didn't show up in front of that mirror and really love what I was seeing, my body is listening. I have trillions of cells inside of this body that are actually listening to what my mind is saying and playing on repeat. And there's such a solid truth in that I had to just rewire my speech. I had to rewire the way I spoke about myself externally. How I had to rewire the way I spoke to myself internally. And then I started working on my breath pattern, because the word breath actually means spirit. So if I break that down, and my breath is what communicates the narrative to my nervous system, which is what communicates everything else to every other part of my body, that's where I was like, okay, wait a minute. This is where I'm going to get that neuro change to set in and become a regular pattern. So I started doing that. I started really focusing on the breath pattern that my body was in. And I found myself, in a really short breath pattern. When you have a stroke, you don't just experience damage on the outside, that damage runs through the dimension of the entire body. So my lung field on my right side was really struggling. And it took me years to figure that piece out. And I had to work on rebuilding those internal muscles, not just the ones that you can see, not just the movement that you can see externally. So once I started working on all of that, I started noticing, and then the food element was a big one. Learning how to use that food as medicine to support the healing I was trying to achieve was huge. Eliminating things out of my diet was huge. And
Oh Lord Jesus, eliminating stuff out the diet. I don't that the food is like the drug,
right.
right? I want to touch base real quick, right? So I'm fascinated by what you said. You said that you had to look at the way that you were speaking to yourself and you were looking at yourself. Um, I, I I think when we say things about ourselves in a negative manner, even if it's jokingly, we're damaging ourselves. We spoke that into the universe. Like unconsciously, we gave it life, we gave it energy, and that may be where you were talking earlier about like someone said, "Man, I don't know if you're ever gonna walk again. I don't know if you're gonna be able to use that fork again. You're probably never gonna be able to stand straight again." And those words verbalized are energy. And some people absorb them and they let them become who they currently are, and which leads to them not being able to win. But you're saying, like, man, I'm telling myself positive things. I'm gonna tell myself the things that I need to pick myself back up. But I'm gonna tell you something else that's happening, right? Not only are you telling yourself, you're telling other people because you may not be speaking to them directly, but indirectly, they're watching you. Like all of the people who knew you before this happened to you, they probably were like, "Well, she's done. You heard what happened to her, you know." And then now, if they see you again, they're like, "Man, she's back in the game." Do you get any of that?
Yeah, I have a lot of people that reach out to me. I have a bunch of women that, and a lot of men too. I have a vast amount of humans that reach out to me, whether they've known me from the past or they've known me, ever since all this happened. And I stay in communication with a lot of them. It's been really, really neat, forming
Mm,
into an open like camera into my life and how my healing is going. And I have, women that surprise me that come to me that really didn't think that they were going to be able to achieve certain things. I have women and men that both come to me
mhm,
and tell me they didn't think
yeah.
that they were going to be able to achieve. And I try to keep it, I keep my journey pretty open for people to see because I've not been one that has relied on the physicians to guide me. I walked away from that about 2.5 years into this journey, and I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. I'm done with people telling me that I'm not going to heal. And I decided at that point that I was just going to figure it out. And I went and taught
Mm,
myself. I became a breathwork facilitator. I became a trauma informed practitioner. I used trauma informed breathwork facilitator and a yoga instructor, and I just dove in, started practicing every single day, because if I'm going to rewire this body, it takes consistency. And that's number 2 that I explain to people on the list. You're the only one in this body. You have to be your cheerleader. You have to show up for you if you want other people to show up for you. And you
mm,
got to be the loudest cheerleader in the room. And then that consistency, right? That consistency
mm,
piece is massive, Massive. Because if you're going to rewire your brain learns, your nervous system learns in repetition. It demands repetition if you want change within a damaged neurosystem. So I demanded that from myself, showed up every day, and now I sit in a place where I have great change. I have great things going on, and I'm so excited about where all this is going to lead.
So let's talk about breath work a little bit more. Do you have people who are kind of like skeptical about it? They're like, I don't know if that work like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. It's so neat to me when I get people that come in a place of doubt, and I work with them for a little while. What's what's really tangible about the breath is that results tend to show up fairly quickly. And when you consistently show up in a practice and put the actual work in, you will see such a change happen. And it happens really subtly. So it's kind of like underneath. And then I have people that show up in the next session and they're like, as we're going through the list of like, oh, well, what's happening this week? And what's going on here? And then all of a sudden they're saying things that they didn't even realize that was happening,
Mm.
and how on this journey, what I have found is that when you can quiet the stress of the mind and not let that mind run the show, not let that frontal lobe take over, not let that limbic system get heavily involved, and train a breath pattern into resiliency where you can see that you can get stressed out, but you can actually get back into calm again easily. You've achieved your destination. It doesn't mean you can stop working on your breath. It means that we can stop working together, and you've got it from here.
So here we go. Can you walk us through what a single intentional breath can actually change in real time?
Yes, it's a physiological change in real time. One of my favorite breaths is the physiological sigh. And it's a simple double inhale in. And there's actually a few different methods that you can use with this. But what you do is you just simply go, the key is the exhale. The inhale is the up regulator, the exhale is the down regulator. So when you're inhaling, what you're doing is you're activating your nervous system. When you're exhaling, you're deactivating, you're down regulating your body. And that's the communication between parasympathetic, rest and digest, and sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze, fawning, all of that. And when you're in a stress state, your amygdala takes over, and that's why, like they say, people can be hot-headed. People that are hot-headed have dysfunctional breath patterns. They're not breathing right. And they're easily shifted into that sympathetic. And when you're shifted into that sympathetic, you can't rationalize with somebody like that. They're a little bit primal. Their limbic system is really taken over, and they got to go take time and cool down. And some people, it takes them a super long time. And I was one of those people. Like, I'll be the first to admit that I was so one of those people before all of this, that it would take me sometimes days to cool down. It was crazy. And these were patterns that were learned as a method of survival.
No. So is it just like something like, so as you going through trauma as a youngster, you just unconsciously you absorbing all these things. You're like, hey, this is the way to make it in this world. If I'm not aggressive, if I'm not confrontational, then I'll get taken advantage of.
Right.
Yeah, because some people really kind of feel like that. I came up in an environment where you might as well just put your fist up. Woke up with your fist up, and then at the house it was happening. On the way to school it was happening. At school it was happening, and then you're scared to go home because like, hey, it's gonna happen to me again. So, I guess I developed this face, because people were like, man, you got this face, man. You look like you're a mean person until they get to know me. So, but with all that being said, like, what do you feel is the biggest mistake people make when trying to heal themselves?
Not listening to their intuition.
Hmm. Why you say that?
Because I believe that we live in the most fabulous and absolutely powerful bodies, and our bodies are very, very capable of healing. And there is a little piece of a higher energy that lives within every one of us that tries to communicate with us all the time. And that's our intuition, that seed of your soul. And a lot of us are so busy in life and we don't slow down enough to even hear those messages that are coming back in. And that's the third thing that breath did for me, was it allowed me to calm the storm. It allowed me to be able to unarmor my heart, therefore unarmor that seed of my soul, so I could actually hear what that higher energy was speaking back to me. And my intuition led me into healing.
That's powerful. So, if your platform like just disappeared tomorrow, what message would you fight to leave behind?
Make relationship with your exhale. Make a relationship with your exhale. Understand it. Use it as a communicator for your entire life, because your exhale is what centers you, grounds you, and balances you.
I got some things to think about. All right, as we getting close to the end, um, but I want to really like ask you this question. Everyone's out there listening. Some people are watching. If someone is in their darkest moment right now, like their darkest moment right now, what would you say directly to them?
Even if you think that things can't change, there is still a light within you that is pulling that breath into you and letting that breath go out of you. That light is your source of change. It can be done. You can heal. Every single one of us can.
You're an example. Like from just listening to you today, I've been watching you, but it's different to sit here and talk to you and listen to your perspective, right? Not only have I appreciated today, but I'm sure there's going to be people out there that just needed this information. I know folks who had strokes, and I would venture to say they're not part of that 1%. They're still down and out. People are taking care of them, and I'm not going to say it's because they didn't believe that they can get back, but I will say the mindset that you have is unparalleled, and the world needs to hear your story. So thank you Thank you for coming on today. And the floor is yours. First off, before we get started, before I give you the floor, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
They can reach out to me through my website, breathladyproject.com. I'm available on Instagram and Facebook. Just shoot me a message, and we can start a conversation, see where you're at to get this rolling.
All right, the floor is yours. What would you like to leave the world with?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you, Rashawn, for giving me this opportunity to speak. And secondly, I was down and out. I was dark. It was dark in the hole I was in after all this occurred. And I sat there wanting to blame every single thing out in the world. And I had to flip my hand over and start looking at these three fingers pointing back at me. Not this one I was pointing out to the world. Because it didn't matter who I thought was at fault. These three fingers were letting me know that I was the one responsible for it. I had to show up, I had to be accountable, and I had to do the work. And it was an honor. All of it was. I'm honored today to live in this form. I'm honored today to be Angelia. I'm honored today to wake up and open my eyes and experience another life, another day of living, and a completely different life than I ever thought I would be living. You know? So thank you again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Healing is achievable. And I got to tell you, too, like I know a ton of people that are still really stuck too. And it's sad. It breaks my heart to see people stuck like that because there's options out there. You just have to start thinking outside of the box.
Well, hey, appreciate you today because you gave people some options. You gave them some perspective. Everybody out in the world, I'm Rashawn Warren. This is CIME, and you just heard from the Breath Lady Project, and we'll see you next time.